Hello, everyone. Tonight, I've got a batch of chilling tales to share with you. But before we dive in, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep creating even better content. Now, sit back, relax, and join me as we embark on this eerie journey together. I never believed old houses held more than dust and brittle floorboards until the first night I moved into 12 Blackwood Lane. The front door groaned like a wounded animal when I turned the key, and my flashlight's beam quivered against peeling wallpaper. I set my suitcase on the creaking hardwood and paused. A cold draft washed over me, carrying a whisper of something ancient. I shrugged it off as a loose window sash and began unpacking. Night fell faster than I expected. The single overhead bulb flickered, stuttering like a failing heartbeat. I climbed the narrow staircase, each step groaning under my weight. At the top, I found the window cracked open, just a sliver. I closed it and latched the lock, but the chill lingered. My breath came out in soft clouds, and I realized the room was colder than the rest of the house. Strange. I thought this room had no exterior walls. I placed a lit candle on the nightstand. Its flame wavered, casting tall, wobbly shadows across the ceiling. The scent of melted wax was sweet and heavy in the air, mingling with something muskier, almost rotten. I told myself it was just the old wood, decaying. I sank into the mattress, exhaustion pressing against my temples. The sheets felt scratchy but familiar enough. I lay on my back, chest rising and falling, listening to the house settle around me. Minutes passed in near silence, then soft. Something slid across the mattress beside me. My heart stuttered. I lay utterly still, afraid even to blink. The candle's glow illuminated the edge of the bed. There was nothing there that I could see, only the pale curve of the mattress. But I felt it, the subtle dip of the spring under an invisible weight. Someone or something curled into the darkness beside me. I kept my eyes fixed on the ceiling, determined not to look. My ears strained for any sound. The wind outside sighed against the panes. The house's timbers murmured under unseen stresses. But the deeper noise was inside my skull, my pulse hammering like a drum. I imagined my lungs contracting, my ribs tightening. I told myself it was my imagination, the after effects of moving stress. I inhaled, slowly exhaled. The candle flickered violently, as though a gust had rushed through the room, though the window was shut. Shadows danced across the walls. I felt a finger cold as granite brushed the back of my neck, sending rivulets of ice down my spine. My breath hitched. My body froze. I dared not move or speak. The candle's flame dipped almost to the wick, then snapped back upright. The imprint on the mattress vanished. The room returned to stillness. Attempting calm, I closed my eyes. I counted backward from 100, willing my heartbeat to slow, priming my mind for sleep. The house exhaled, and I thought maybe the disturbance was over. Then, in the blackness behind my eyelids, I heard a rasp, a dry, rasping inhale like someone drawing breath after a long hold underwater. I held my breath and waited. Nothing. Just the relentless beating beneath my ribs. I cracked one eye open. The candle guttered. Shadows pooled at the foot of the bed. I blinked, and the darkness shifted, coalescing into something crouched. At first glance, just a patch of black, but then I saw the shape, a slender, curved silhouette. Its edges too fine for flesh. It watched me. I watched it. My throat tightened, words evaporating before they formed. The air grew heavier. Every breath felt like drawing through cloth. I sensed a vibration in the floorboards, subtle but insistent, as though the house itself pulsed in rhythm with some unseen heart. The candle flame bowed toward the figure, reluctant to illuminate. I dared not look directly, but every nerve in my body screamed to flee. My hands curled into fists beneath the sheet. Something pressed against me again. A weightless force leaning into my side. I pictured ribs being gently pushed, a head resting on the same pillow. I stiffened, terrified to move. And then the thing sighed, long, low, sorrowful. A sound that echoed in the silence like distant church bells. I felt tears spring in my eyes. Sorrow and fear merged until I couldn't discern which I felt more. The candle blinked out, leaving me in near pitch black. Panic flared. My mind raced. What if this presence was attached forever? What if sleep never came again? I fumbled for my phone hands, brushing the cold wood of the nightstand. My fingers closed around it, and I tapped the flashlight app. A narrow beam pierced the gloom, but the light trembled. The beam revealed nothing, just the mattress, the wall empty space. I snapped the light off. I didn't want to see. I wanted it to vanish. I lay rigid, praying for dawn. My thoughts tumbled. Who or what had followed me here? Why did it choose this broken house, this forsaken room? I remembered the realtor's offhand mention. Some say people who stay in that room can't sleep. I'd laughed then. It wasn't funny now. Hours passed in a haze. At some point, I drifted toward an uneasy half-sleep, drifting in and out of awareness. Each time the presence shifted, I jolted awake. Each time it was closer, pressing closer, until my shoulder almost touched nothingness beside me. When the first gray threads of morning wove through the curtains, the weight lifted. The draft retreated. The room warmed. I dared to open my eyes. The mattress lay empty. The candle stub was cold. The dark silhouette had gone. I lay panting, clutching the sheet. First light crept across the wall, banishing shadows. I sat up, rubbed my arms against goose flesh. The house was silent, too silent. I touched my palm to the space where it had pressed its weight. I felt only the rough fabric of the sheets. I stood and crossed to the door. Behind me, the room looked peaceful, as if it had never trembled with an otherworldly presence. But I knew better. I knew something had been there, and I knew it would come again. I flipped the light switch, but the bulb was dead. The hallway beyond lay in darkness. I hesitated, then stepped into the gloom, leaving the room's oppressive chill behind, but not entirely leaving it, because its echo still lingered under my skin. I never truly slept again that month, but exhaustion dragged me toward unconsciousness the next night. I lit 2 candles, this time one on the nightstand, one on the small dresser across the room. Their flames swayed in unison, casting twin pillars of amber light. I watched them dance, willing each flicker to keep the darkness at bay. My heart pounded with remembered terror, but the room felt quieter. At least until the moment I lay down. The sheets still felt too cold, as if they'd absorbed the chill of that invisible form. I pulled the blanket, tight chest heaving with each breath. I closed my eyes. The weight came first, a soft pressure along my hip, then the slow, methodical tracing of something over my calf. I still recalling how it had first pressed beside me. My skin prickled, goosebumps rising. The candles flared, then dimmed, as though the room inhaled around me. Sleep. A voice whispered no louder than the brush of silk against skin. It was neither male nor female, but ancient. The sound vibrated in my skull. I rubbed my eyes, but the invitation persisted, curling through my thoughts. Sleep. It sighed again, and a sense of calm washed over me, lulling my muscles. I fought. It clenched my jaw, but the word felt like an enchantment. Darkness crept back behind my eyelids, and I drifted. I dreamed of Blackwood Lane, as it once was sunlight, pouring through shuttered windows, children laughing in the hall dinner plates clattering. Everything felt warm and safe. A tall figure stood at the end of the hallway, its features shrouded. It seemed to watch the family, its head tilted. I called out, but no sound emerged. The vision shattered with a jolt, and I woke to a gentle thump on my chest, as though someone had placed a hand there. My eyes flew open. The nearest candle lay toppled on the nightstand, wax pooled across the wood. Smoke curled upward. The second candle flickered violently. I sat up, heart racing. "Who are you?" I whispered, dazed. Silence answered. Then the dragging movement returned, sliding up my torso to linger at my shoulder. My skin went taut, every nerve on fire. I reached beneath the pillow, my fingers brushing the cold metal of my phone. I flipped on the flashlight. The beam revealed only the empty space beside me. I swung the light toward the dresser mirror. Its reflection showed me slumped, wide-eyed. But behind me, in the mirror's edge, I swore. I saw a shape, a curved horn, a sloping shoulder, and two glowing points, like embers hovering in the corner of my vision. I spun around. Nothing. The room lay empty, save for shadows. I closed my eyes, willing the fear to subside. A laugh, a slow, low chuckle, rippled through the darkness. It sounded amused, curious. My breath caught. The chuckle faded into a whisper, closer. The word caressed my ear. I felt a shift of weight so slight I almost missed it. Then, warmth pressed into my neck, a breath hot against the nape. I trembled, frozen. "Why are you here?" I gasped. Silence. Then a single phrase ghosted inside my mind. "To know you." The words twisted around me like smoke. My thoughts scattered know me. Before I could reply, the warmth slid down, my side fingertips of heat trailing toward my hand. My pulse thundered. I gripped the sheet. The temperature around me turned stifling, as if the room had shrunk walls closing in. Images flashed. Alabaster skin, stained with candle wax. Candlelight dancing on bone-white fingers. A slight curl of an unnatural smile. My fingers loosened on the sheet. I heard my own heartbeat echoing. I risked a glance at the dresser mirror again. This time, the embers glowed steadily, 2 points drifting toward me, and I saw more slender limbs arching, as though perched atop some unseen stool. But the mirror's glass began to ripple, warping the reflection. The demon reached out, and its fingertips brushed the glass, leaving behind dark smudges that looked like tears. pressed on my palm to the mirror's surface, my reflection trembling. The smudges writhed, stretching into tendrils that curled around the glass's edge. A terrible pull tugged at me, both beckoning and warning. My skin crawled. I yanked my hand back, knocking the phone to the floor, its light extinguished. The room went pitch black. I felt it lean close face brushing mine, its breath acrid with never-ending ages. My mind reeled memories, not my own, flitted through my thoughts. A child's sorrowful cry, the scrape of a nail, a long stone, a void so vast it swallowed stars. The demon's voice echoed inside my skull. Remember. I screamed, but no sound emerged. Panic slammed into me, and I bolted upright, flinging the sheets aside. I lunged for the door, fumbling the latch with shaking hands. The door flew open, and I spilled into the hallway, chest heaving. The dim corridor light revealed peeling walls and crooked picture frames. I shivered as relief washed through me. The weight was gone. For a moment I thought I was safe. Then I heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, coming from my room. My blood ran cold. I half turned, a scream rising in my throat, but no shape stepped into the corridor. Instead, the door closed on its own accord, thudding shut. The latch clicked. I lunged at it, but the handle refused to turn. I pounded, yelled, my voice hollow, in the narrow hall. The footsteps resumed, circling outside the door, slower now. Each step struck like a heartbeat, echoing in the dark. "Let me in," came the whisper, gentle and coaxing. I staggered back against the wall, tears stinging my eyes. "No," I gasped. "Get out." Silence. Then a soft sigh, as though disappointed. The candlelight in my room flickered through the crack beneath the door. I watched until the candle finally extinguished and flame gave way to total darkness. I sank to the floor, hugging my knees, my mind hammered. Was it gone? Would it return? My exhaustion overwhelmed me, yet sleep threatened to consume my sanity. I slipped into a restless haze, half dreaming of fractured faces of black wings brushing against my cheek. I awoke at dawn, tangled in the hallway's chill. My forehead rested against the door. I pressed my ear to the wood. Only silence. I pushed the door open. Inside the room lay untouched. Candles melted into one misshapen pool. The mirror cracked across its surface, and the sheets twisted into knots. On the mattress, I found smudged fingerprints, dark oily imprints that felt slick under my fingertips. I recoiled, heart pounding. I stared at them, mesmerized by their unnatural shape, slender, elongated ending in fine tapered tips. The demon's signature. I knew then the line between dream and waking had shattered. It lingered in both a reminder that wherever I roamed, even in daylight's false comfort, it was always just behind me, waiting for the lights to dim again. I left the fingerprints untouched. I left the door ajar. And I understood that in the night's quiet intimacy, the demon was learning every corner of my fear, down to the way my chest heaved, the pattern of my breath, the shape of my tears. It was closer than ever before, and there was no sanctuary left between us. Morning light filtered through the cracked window, but it offered no comfort. I stumbled from the room, eyelids heavy, every step a reminder of the night's assault. My reflection in the hallway mirror seemed distorted, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. I touched the glass, lightly faint smudges of oily fingerprints clung to its edge, as though the demon had marked me forever. I shivered and turned away. I spent the day searching the house for answers. In the attic beneath a dusty tarp, I found an old leather-bound journal. Its pages crackled when I opened it. Inside were entries from a previous tenant, someone who described encounters that mirrored mine, the weightless touches, the sorrowful sighs, the whispered demands. The writer sketched crude diagrams of protective symbols, circles etched in ash salt lines and mirrors placed to repel shadows. At the very end, a final note: face it directly. It fears its own shape. That evening I prepared. In the center of my bedroom floor, I spread a ring of salt-kneaded ash into lines forming a pentagon and placed 2 small mirrors along opposite sides. I lit 6 candles at each vertex. The air smelled of smoke and iron. My hands trembled as I arranged them. On the nightstand, I left the journal open to the sketch of a hand pressing against glass. As dusk bled into night, I sat at the circle's edge, heart hammering. Every creak of the floorboards raised my guard. When the first candle guttered, I whispered a shaky vow: I will not cower. The darkness thickened, and the door to the room rattled. A cold breeze swept through, extinguishing 2 candles at once. Shadows pooled in the corners, coalescing into that slender silhouette I dreaded. It hovered just beyond the salt line, glowing embers for eyes. Come, it hissed, voice melodic and fatal. The flame of my remaining candles danced away from it as though recoiling. I stood, palms open and bare. My legs shook, but I stepped forward, crossing the salt boundary. The demon hesitated at the ash pentagon's edge claws scraping the wood floor. I met its gaze in the mirror placed to my left. The reflection showed a face both familiar and alien. My own features twisted into something emaciated, eyes hollow pits of sorrow. Behind me, I heard its breath against the glass, hot and rancid. You fear yourself, I whispered, recalling the journal's final words. The demon's mirrored twin stared back, mouth curving into that unnatural smile. A low growl shivered through the room. The pentagon's ash lines shimmered, and the demon recoiled as though the symbols burned its flesh. It lashed out a whip of shadow, slicing through the air. I ducked behind the opposite mirror, which trembled in its stand. Its surface rippled like water, then steadied enough to reflect the fleeing embers of candlelight. I seized a shard from a broken mirror on the floor, one jagged sliver I'd hidden earlier. My hand closed around it, knuckles whitening. I stepped forward again, positioning the mirror shard so that the demon's reflection fragmented across its sharp edges. Its embers of eyes splintered into strobing points of light, multiplying and warping. The creature shrieked a sound like glass shattering. It lunged at me, a blurred mass of limbs and teeth. I held the shard high, forcing it toward its face. The shard caught the candlelight, emitting a bright gleam. The demon's reflection splintered further, fracturing the shape it had worn so long. Pain lanced through my arm, sharp as a nail drawn across my bone. I realized the demon had struck its fingertip claws, grazing me. Warm blood welled at the scratch. I bit back a cry, all my focus on keeping the shard aligned with the reflection. The pentagon of ash glowed faintly underfoot. The demon reeled, clutching its head as though the shard's reflection had severed something essential. I advanced, voice firm. Return to nothingness. My words trembled, but I held them true. It threw back its head and howled a sound that rattled the windows and buckled the candle flame. I thrust the shard forward, splintering the reflection into a cascade of light. The candles flared, then all exploded in a flash of heat and sound. I covered my face, arms raised. When I dared to look again, the room was empty. The mirrors lay shattered candles reduced to stubs, ash blown across the floor like gray snow. I sank to my knees in the center of the ash pentagon, chest heaving. My wound burned, but the air felt lighter, as though a weight I didn't realize pressed against my lungs had lifted. I held the shard in trembling fingers, staring at nothing but the silence of victory. But silence can lie. A final whisper curled through the darkness soon. It was neither threat nor promise. It was merely a vow. My heart lurched, and I dropped the shard. It clattered and came to rest beside the salt line, unmoving. I stared at the pentagon's bare center. The ash smudged under my knees, and the salt glowed ghost white in the candlelight that remained. The demon had been forced back, but not banished. It would return only to find the circle stronger. Next time, my will firmer, my knowledge deeper. I rose slowly, dragging myself out of the ash. I gathered the salt into a small pouch and slipped it into my pocket. I swept the remaining ash into a scrap of cloth and tied it tight. When dawn broke, I would leave this house. I would never forget the taste of its breath, the weight of its press, or the shadow of its smile. But I would carry my victory with me, the shard's splintered reflection, the salt and ash that held it at bay. And if ever it found me again, I would be waiting. The moment I lifted the doll from its box, a weight settled in my chest, an unspoken promise of something watched. The doll's delicate porcelain face, cracked in a web of age, stared without blink or mercy. Its glassy eyes caught the dim light of my lamp, reflecting back a silent vigil. The doll wore a faded dress of lace and velvet fraying at the seams, as if decades of secrets clung to its threads. I tucked it onto the mantel beside family photographs, hoping familiarity would mute the unrest in my mind. But the house was older than any memory I held, and its halls whispered of histories I could not name. That first evening, I moved through rooms in half-light, stacking books and arranging lamps, each task punctuated by the doll's unwavering stare. My footsteps echoed in empty corridors. The wood beneath my soles murmured complaints. In the corner of my eye, I thought I saw motion, a flicker at the edge of my vision. A curtain fluttered, though no breeze entered. In the kitchen, the window latch clicked shut behind me, though I had locked it moments before. Night came heavy and slow. I read in the living room until my eyes blurred. A single bulb above burned gold, its filament humming with tired energy. Shadows gathered at the wall's edges, stretching thin and long. I checked the doll's position. Its head tilted just so, arms resting by its side. All was still. I told myself imagination played cruel tricks. The house had quirks, old wiring, loose boards. But then the lullaby began, soft and distant. A melody rose from somewhere between the floorboards and ceiling joists. I froze. The lullaby stuttered a warped piano note, a child's giggle trapped in echo. I rose, heart hammering, and traced the sound past the hallway. The hush swallowed my breath as I neared the nursery, an empty room where paint peeled like drying skin. The cradle in the corner was vacant, no source for the song. The melody drifted to nothing, leaving me in a hush that pressed against my ears. I retreated to the living room and stared at the doll. A bead of sweat rolled down my temple. The doll's unblinking gaze felt sharper, now accusatory. I flicked off the lamp. Darkness spilled across the floor. My pulse roared. I reached out, brushing the doll's arm as if to ground myself. Cold porcelain against my skin. I whispered a silent apology for unsettling for no reason. Then I turned toward the hallway, intent on checking the locks once more. A soft thud made me jerk. Behind me, the doll sat not on the mantel, but on the floor, knees folded neatly under its dress. I staggered back, my foot catching on the rug. The doll's head tilted upward, eyes boring into me. My spine curved into a frozen arc. I blinked twice. The doll was back on the mantel. I would have sworn I'd seen it move. I fled to my bedroom, slamming the door and pressing my back against the wood. The air inside was stifling thick, with dust motes dancing in moonlight. My bed stood unmade sheets tangled like ropes. I flipped on the bedside lamp. Shadows danced across the ceiling, like fingers leaving trails of ink in the night. I lay beneath the sheets, trembling, stomach twisting. The lullaby began again, fainter, as if wafting in through the cracked window. My hands clutched the blanket's nails, biting into skin. I closed my eyes. The song held me hostage. My mind flicked through memories of childhood nightmares where toys came alive. I had laughed at such stories. Now I cursed every haunted tale I'd ever mocked. Each second stretched elastic and cruel. Then silence. I dared to breathe. One eyelid flickered open. Moonlight spilled across my floorboards. That's when I saw it. The doll stood at the foot of my bed, its arms outstretched as though stepping forward. My legs burned with ice. I could not move. The doll's glass eyes found mine cold and unrelenting. I felt its presence dig into my bones. I willed myself to look away, but I could not. I blinked, and it was gone. A thump echoed in the hallway. My door rattled. The lullaby returned closer now, as if a record spun on a turntable in the next room. My breath caught in my throat. The lamp flickered. Darkness pulsed. Then the curtains rustled, though the window lay closed. I stumbled from the bed, fleeing into the bathroom. I slammed the door, my back pressed against cool tile. The mirror reflected my wide eyes, pale and rimmed red. My breaths came in sharp sobs. The lullaby drifted down the corridor, slower now, dragging each note like a stone. It stopped abruptly. Silence. My ears rang. I cracked the door. The hallway was empty. The doll lay in the center of the corridor, face down on the wood. I forced myself forward, each footstep a thunderclap in my ears. My fingertips brushed the doll's cotton skirt. I yanked it toward me. The porcelain cheek was scuffed. I hurled it back toward the mantel. I raced to the living room and shoved the doll onto the highest shelf I could reach. The lace dress pooled beneath its knees. I stared at it, panting, tears threatening. The room pressed in around me. The yellow bulb's light seemed dimmer, the shadows denser. I tiptoed away, cradling my arms as if to shield from some lingering cold. When I collapsed on the sofa, my phone lay abandoned. I dialed a friend's number, mouth dry. No answer. I folded into myself. The doll's eyes gleamed from above, mocking. I pulled the blanket over my head. My heart thundered a frantic rhythm. I slept eventually, if it could be called sleep dreaming, of porcelain fingers reaching from the darkness. Morning came too soon, sunlight barely filtering through the curtains. The house was silent. The doll awaited on its shelf, unchanged. But I knew the vigil was only beginning. Dawn seeped through the blinds in thin, pale slashes. I awoke gasping, as if pulled from water. My breath came in shallow bursts. The last ember of last night's dread flickered in my chest. I reached blindly for the bedside lamp. My fingers found its switch, and the room flooded with muted orange brightness. I blinked, trying to steady a mind still tangled in nightmare. The doll was gone from its high perch. My stomach clenched. I sat up, heart pounding. The shelf yawned empty, its dark stain of varnish exposed. I scanned the room. No porcelain silhouette behind my headboard. The shadows retreated as if ashamed. I swung my legs over the bed and stood bare feet cool against the wood. The silence pressed down. My pulse drummed in my ears. I crept into the hallway. The doll lay face up at the threshold, half draped over the edge of the runner. Its dress fluttered, disturbed. I froze. Every instinct screamed to turn away. Instead, I forced my legs forward. The doll's glass eyes glimmered oddly in morning light, unblinking. I felt its gaze pierce me, calculating. A trick of nightmares playing on daylight's stage. I backed away, heart searing with panic. Then I spotted them scratches on the wall. Thin, dark lines that looked torn across the plaster. They radiated from the doll's position like black veins. I knelt for a closer look. Each mark was jagged, uneven, as if claws had raked at the surface. The wood floor bore dents, too small gouges that weren't there last night. My breath quickened. The air smelled faintly of iron. Cold dread pooled in my gut. I pressed a trembling palm to the wall. The surface felt warm, as if the scratches had burned through time. I traced a line with a fingertip. The plaster crumbed beneath my nail. My skin prickled at the thought of unseen hands working in the dark. I scrambled backward, nearly tripping over the doll, which I shoved aside with my foot. I stumbled down the corridor. The nursery door stood ajar. The pale room felt wrong in daylight, like a bruise on the house. The cradle lay overturned, sheets tangled in a heap. I had never touched this room. It held no memories for me, but something ancient lingered in the corners. I swallowed bile. The lullaby began again, as faint as a sigh. My blood froze. I shivered despite the rising sun. Another set of scratches marked the nursery wall low to the ground, as though someone or something had crawled. The series of gouges traced a messy path down the length of the wall. I imagined a ragged figure moving in silence. I willed the song to stop. It did, but only to begin further away, drifting down the hall. My mind slid toward madness. I flicked off the nursery light and fled. Each step felt heavy, as if I carried a stone in the pit of my stomach. I sensed the doll's presence crawling behind me. Its weight followed. My breathing hitched. I reached the living room. The coffee table bore a smear of dirt and a single fingerprint pressed deep in the wood's grain. I sank onto the sofa, shoulders heaving. My pulse thundered. The lamp flickered once, twice. Darkness bled around its base. Something moved in the corner of my vision, a slight stalking silhouette. I jerked my head. Nothing. Just the top of the mantel. Empty. The doll was missing again. I bolted to the entryway, yanking open coat closets. No doll inside. My hands trembled so badly, I could barely grip the handle of the front door. I opened it wide. The street outside lay empty. No postman, no early jogger. Just the quiet hum of suburban morning. I peered down the walk. A scrap of paper fluttered at the curb. I stepped outside and snatched it up, pinned under stone. I recognized my handwriting. I unfolded the note. Scrawled in tight, precise letters were 3 words. Stop looking at me. My skin crawled. I dropped the paper and stumbled back indoors. The door swung shut. I pressed my back against it, knees buckling. The wallpaper shifted in my gaze, its floral pattern twisting into watchful faces. The lace of the doll's dress lingered in my lungs. I forced myself upright and moved to the living room window. I peered out. Everything was still. Nothing moved except the curtains drifting in a thin breeze. I tore my eyes from the glass. That's when I saw the shapes, shadows climbing the walls. They elongated, coiling upward like serpents. They gathered at the ceiling's edge, pooling into a dark stain that seeped down in rivulets. My chest slammed with fear. I could almost hear them whispering voices, thin and sibilant. I pressed my palms to my ears. The hush roared around me. I closed my eyes and pictured morning. I pictured sunlight warming my back. I pictured safety. When I opened them, again the shadows were gone, but the drip marks remained on the wall. They looked like tears. My skin went cold. I counted to 10, struggling to breathe. I forced myself toward the hall. Each step echoed. My shadow stretched long and fractured on the floor. I passed the nursery, its door now closed. I reached the mantel. The doll sat there, arms crossed, face as calm as ever. No scratches, no telltale signs of struggle. I rubbed my eyes. It couldn't be both empty and occupied. I swallowed hard. I wanted to destroy the doll, throw it from the highest window. I wanted to set it aflame. I wanted anything but to sit across from it on the mantel and stare into those glossy eyes. I stood frozen body taut as wire mind unraveling. The doll did not judge, it only watched. I undid the catch of the display case I'd hastily built, lifting aside a glass pane. My fingers closed around the doll's waist. Its surface was ice cold. I felt the rebellion of terror in my bones. I yanked. The doll came free. I brought it to my chest. The world tilted. A whisper brushed my ear so soft, I thought I imagined it. The words stung more than any slap. You invited me here. My breath caught. I swung around. No one stood behind me. Just the empty room. I backed away, clutching the doll. My heart pounded. My throat seized. I felt the walls close and the floor tilt. I bolted down the hall, the doll tucked under my arm, like a jagged stone. I burst into the kitchen. Cabinets yawned open. Dishes rattled in the sink. The faucet dripped in time with my racing pulse. I curled into a corner, dragging my knees to my chest. The doll rested on my lap. Dress, crumpled face tilted toward me. Cracked lines in its porcelain skin caught stray light, mapping a spider web across its cheek. It did not blink. It did not breathe. Yet I felt it alive. The faucet stopped dripping. Silence crept in. I dared to look up. The doll sat on the floor beside me. I blinked. It was back on the counter, nestled against a jar of spoons. My mind splintered. The doll could not be here. It could not be there. It should not be anywhere except its shelf. But it was everywhere. A new lullaby began in my head, sung without melody. Notes scraped raw. I pressed my palms to my temples, fighting the maddening refrain. The doll's eyes glowed in the dim under-cabinet light. I shoved myself to my feet, scrambling backward, until my spine hit the cabinet door. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them, the doll stood in the doorway, arms raised as if welcoming me deeper into its game. My breath left me. I stumbled over my own feet and landed on my hands and knees. The tile was cold. I crawled backward until the back of my head hit the refrigerator. I looked up, wincing. The doll loomed over me, face inches away. Its breath was non-existent, but its presence pressed into my chest. I summoned what remained of my strength and lurched forward, grabbing a rolling pin from the counter. The doll's gaze locked onto mine. I raised the pin. My knuckles whitened. The doll's lips parted in a silent sigh. The kitchen light flickered. Then everything stopped. No lullaby. No creaks. No whispers. The doll stood unmoved, waiting. I dropped the rolling pin and scrambled away. My legs carried me out the door, across the lawn, into the bright wash of day. I didn't stop running until the house was a dark silhouette behind me. I pressed my back against the street lamp pole, gasping. The world seemed absurdly peaceful, but I knew it wouldn't end. The doll would follow. Shadows would crawl. The marks would deepen. No sunrise could banish that thing. It waited, and I had nowhere safe to hide. Night draped the world in velvet, thick and suffocating. I crept back to the house just past sunset, every footstep heavy with dread. The streetlights flickered as I passed, casting long shadows that reached for me like skeletal fingers. I had nowhere else to turn. My small apartment offered no refuge from what I had brought into my life. The faint hum of the heater droned in my ears, but it did nothing to warm the cold stain on my soul. I forced open the door. The house greeted me with silence, pregnant and expectant. The front hall lay empty. No echoes of my earlier panic. I stepped inside, my hand pressed against the door frame to steady myself. Each breath came shallow, as if lungs feared to draw the doll's poison into my blood. My gaze flicked to the mantel. The doll sat exactly where I had left it when I fled at dawn, arms folded, head tilted in silent judgment. I swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. The air smelled of dust and old wood, tainted with something darker decay, despair. I crossed to the mantel, every nerve screaming to turn away. My fingers stopped inches from the doll's porcelain arm. Memories of terrified nights flooded me. The lullaby, the moving shadows, the scratches like claws. I steeled myself. I would end this. I knelt on the floor, rolling pin in hand, determined. The doll's glass eyes gleamed in the fading light. I raised the pin. My arm shook. The doll did nothing. It simply stared, impassive. I swung. The rolling pin struck hollow wood beneath the doll. The doll did not break. My heart lurched. I swung again, harder. The pin shattered into splinters. The doll remained pristine. A whisper curled around me, cold and mocking. You cannot break me. I staggered back, my hand pressed to my mouth to stifle a scream. Thunder rumbled, though no storm threatened. The lights flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, its feeble glow offering scant comfort. I tapped the flashlight app. A beam of pale light cut through the gloom, illuminating the doll's face. The cracks in the porcelain seemed to shift, widening into black fissures that pulsed with life. I bolted across the room, nearly stumbling over a chair. The walls closed in the house, groaning around me. Doors slammed. Unseen, windows rattled. I heard the lullaby, warped and distant, beckoning me into the depths. My legs carried me to the entryway, but it held fast. The door would not budge. Panicked, I spun around. The doll was gone from the mantel. The beam of light trembled as I swept it across the room. There, in the archway to the living room, the doll stood framed by darkness, its arms outstretched, dress swaying as if in a breeze I could not feel. Its eyes glowed with an inner flame. I swallowed a scream and stepped backward. It's time, the voice breathed, resonant in my skull. The doll's head tilted and the room shifted. Walls elongated, floors warping under invisible weight. The lullaby became a roar, drowning out reason. I covered my ears, lowering to my knees. Then silence. The doll stepped forward. My flashlight faltered. I fumbled, pressing the button again. The beam returned, but the doll was inches away. I lunged forward, seizing its cold shoulder. Its porcelain skin felt smooth, unyielding. I shook it. "Why are you here?" I rasped. Tears glistened in my eyes. The doll's lips curved into a ghost of a smile. "Because you opened the door." The voice was everywhere and nowhere. "You invited me." My chest constricted. Memories flickered, unpacking the doll, placing it so innocently on the shelf. I had thought it a treasure. I had welcomed it with warmth. That moment had carved a pathway. The house whispered its ascent. The doll's song had begun. I slammed my fists into the doll's torso. It did not break. A sharp pain bloomed in my hand. Blood welled from a cut I did not remember receiving. I sniffed the air, iron and porcelain. The doll's head leaned closer, eyes boring into mine. "You cannot leave," it whispered. "Not now." My vision blurred. I staggered away, cradling my hand. The house groaned, closing ranks around me. I felt the walls breathe alive with malice. I dashed into the hallway, the doll gliding beside me with unnatural grace. I slammed open the nursery door and dove inside, closing it behind me. The pale room welcomed me with emptiness. The cradle stood upright. The scratched walls glimmered faintly in the flashlight's beam, like old scars exposed. I backed against the wall, sliding down until I sat. The doll's song was muffled here, distant. I pressed my palms to my ears, trying to shut out the madness. The door rattled. The cracks in the plaster reached toward me like gnarled fingers. The doll appeared in the crack of the door, face half hidden in shadow. Its glass eye caught a gleam of light, flicker, gleam, stare. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. I pictured sunrise beyond these walls. I pictured the street outside. I pictured escape. I opened my eyes. The cradle was empty, but behind it, in the corner, the doll sat cross-legged on the floor. It smiled at me the first time I saw it curve its lips. My heart stopped. The nursery shifted, folding in on itself. The floorboards rose like waves, the walls leaning forward. A single candle flickered on the windowsill, leading me deeper. I stood drawn by terror and resolve. I moved toward the candle, my hand bleeding onto the floor. The doll rose, trailing after me. I gripped the candle, its flame wobbling. The nursery door slammed shut. The lullaby echoed from beyond, gentle and cruel. I set the candle on the floor. Its wick burned low. I sat before it, legs crossed facing the doll. It mirrored me. For a moment, the world held its breath. The lullaby ceased. I spoke, voice trembling. "What do you want?" My words sounded hollow. The doll cocked its head. In the faint light, its cracks seemed to shift, forming symbols, runes I could not read. Then the voice whispered, "Company." My chest tightened. I understood. The doll craved presence, a witness to its vigil. It fed on attention, on fear. It had moved me from room to room, scratching the walls, humming its song, yearning to keep me close. I felt the truth settle like ash. I stood and picked up the candle, holding it between us. The flame danced. "I see you," I said. "I won't look away." The doll's shoulders relaxed. Its glass eyes dimmed. The nursery walls receded. The floor flattened. The cradle returned to stillness. The lullaby whispered once, soft as a sigh. The doll tilted its head, then stepped back. I set the candle on the windowsill. Its flame steadied. The door clicked. Outside the hallway, lights flickered back to life. I approached the doll. Kneeling, I lifted it gently. This time, not with terror, but with pity. I cradled its cold form. "I will watch," I whispered. "I will be your company." The doll's cracked lips seemed to tilt in a semblance of gratitude. I carried it back to the mantel. Every step felt lighter, as though the house exhaled with relief. I placed the doll on its shelf. The air warmed. The shadows retreated. The silence settled, gentle as dawn. I backed away and turned on every light in the house. The rooms glowed. The doll's vigil continued, but now I shared it. I would remain awake, a sentinel in its company. The lullaby lingered at the edge of hearing, quieter now, content. I sat on the sofa and waited, candlelight flickering in my peripheral vision. Fear still pulsed in my veins, but it felt distant, tempered by understanding. The doll watched. I watched back. We kept each other company until sunrise, until the lullaby faded into the world's mundane hum. And in that fragile peace, I learned the truth. Some doors, once open, demand a guardian rather than a prisoner. I first sensed something wrong the night I polished the mirror in our grandmother's attic. Its surface gleamed like obsidian, cold and expectant. I perched on a dusty trunk, wiping away decades of grime, and glanced over my shoulder at my sister Eliza, who squinted at the low light. The attic's single bulb flickered in protest, casting elongated shadows that quivered against beadboard walls. Even the air felt heavy, as though the very particles conspired to suffocate breath. Eliza's reflection shifted a fraction slower than she did. At first I blamed the poor light, our eyes playing tricks. But when she raised her hand, the image waited a beat before answering. I stiffened, pulse thudding. My fingers froze on the rag. The mirror seemed to hum, its edges blurred, as if eager to swallow more than our images. I set the rag down. "Did you see that?" I whispered. She frowned, stepping closer. "See what?" "Your reflection." It lagged. Her brow furrowed. She waved once, twice. The reflected Eliza hesitated before copying. A shiver skittered down my spine. The mirror's frame was carved with twisting vines and strange symbols I barely recognized, an eye, half open, a crescent moon bleeding into a star. They seemed to shift under my gaze, alive. "What is this thing?" Eliza murmured, brushing her hair away. She looked pale in the dim glow, her pupils rimmed with silver light. I swallowed. My throat was raw. "I don't know." I circled the mirror, inspecting its back. The wood was blackened, streaked with age. I caught a faint odor, like burned sugar, sweet and acrid. A sudden crash echoed behind us. I spun. A box on the floor had tipped itself over. Old photographs tumbled out, yellowed and curling. Faces stared up at me. Solemn children, stern women draped in lace, men whose eyes were too bright. I snatched a photo, heart hammering. A little girl clutching a doll stood before the same mirror frame, exactly the same. The date scrawled in elegant script, April 14th, 1903. Eliza perched on the trunk again, cradling the mirror. "This belonged to Grandma?" she asked. "I don't think so." I shook my head. "Great-grandma's, maybe. We never used this." My hand drifted to the mirror's edge. I touched the glass, icy cold, numbing. Eliza grabbed my arm. "Don't she warned eyes distant?" I jerked away. "Something's off." She nodded, chewing her lip. When she turned back, the reflected attic lay empty. No me, no Eliza. My breath caught. I whipped around. We were still there, bathed in sickly yellow light. The mirror held only shadows. I lunged forward, peering into the glass. Movement flickered at the frame's edge. A shape lurked hunched. Its eyes gleamed like wet stones, and a thin smile stretched too wide. For a breath, I thought it was Eliza, but the reflection's mouth moved when hers didn't. It craned its head and hissed a sound without words, low and reverberating in my skull. "Stop!" I shouted, stumbling back. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might tear through my ribs. Eliza grabbed my hand, squeezing until I felt my fingers tingle. I looked to her for reassurance, but her wide eyes mirrored my panic. The bulb above shattered with a pop. Darkness swallowed the attic. I yanked Eliza toward the stairs, but my legs felt leaden. The air hummed again, and I realized it wasn't just our panting. Something else was breathing. Then silence. We hurried down the narrow stairs, each step groaning like a dying animal. At the bottom, we spilled into the hallway, flicking on the light. The mirror's presence haunted the threshold, its frame casting twisted patterns on the carpet. Eliza let go of my hand and insisted we leave it there. Only when she slammed the attic door shut did I exhale. That night, I dreamed of glass teeth closing around my throat. I woke choking sweat coating my skin. Eliza slept beside me, curled so tightly her knuckles were white. I reached out, but she flinched away. In the days that followed, the mirror's hunger grew. I felt its eyes every time I passed the attic door. Sometimes I swore I heard whispering through the walls, soft breaths urgent and pleading. When I glanced back, the mirror's frame seemed to ripple as though breathing. Eliza avoided the attic too, but I caught her lingering at the top of the stairs, peering through a crack. At dinner, she cut her food in small, precise bites, her gaze distant. I asked if she was all right, and she blamed stress. I didn't press. One afternoon, I returned home early. The house was still. I slipped off my shoes and wandered to the landing. The attic door stood slightly ajar. My pulse ricocheted. I pushed it open. The mirror was gone. My breath seized. I scanned the dusty floor. The mirror's outline glowed faintly on the rug, as if scorched. I followed the mark to the hallway. Mirrored glass bits glinted like fallen stars. They trailed toward my sister's room. I crept forward. The hallway light stuttered. Each shard of glass reflected my face in fragments slanted and elongated. I stepped over a shard and winced. It was cool underfoot. At Eliza's door, I froze. The glass led right inside. I pushed the door open. She sat on the bed, knees drawn up, surrounded by a ring of candles. Their flames bowed away from something in the center, a black reflective surface lying face up on the carpet. My heart thudded. The mirror had moved itself. "Eliza," I whispered. She didn't look up. Her hair fell in front of her face, and when she brushed it aside, her eyes held a hollow light. She was staring into the mirror. "Stop," I said, stepping closer, voice trembling. She raised a finger. The reflection flickered. I saw her face, then not her. The girl from the photograph stared back. Eyes bright smile, thin. The reflection blinked once, then twice. "Eliza, get away." She stood slowly backing toward me. The candle flames danced violently, shadows gargling across the walls. A low humming filled the room, matching the beating in my chest. The mirror's surface rippled, and the girl let out a keening wail that split the air. The candles extinguished, plunging us into darkness. I fumbled for the light switch. When the lamp buzzed on, Eliza was gone. The mirror lay on the carpet, the black glass empty. I dropped to my knees, hands shaking, praying she would be behind me. She wasn't. A drip of wax fell on the mirror's surface, cracking it. A tiny fissure crawled outward like a living thing. I heard a soft voice behind me, too close. "Come play." I spun, but there was no one. Just the broken mirror, its frame swelling with dark intent. My breath froze. I backed away, heart lodged in my throat. The attic door creaked open upstairs. The hunger waited. I could still hear Eliza's pulse in my ears, fading, weakening. I had to act before the mirror ate us both. I couldn't sleep. Every breath felt heavy, as though shadows pressed against my chest. The mirror's emptiness on my sister's floor haunted me. Late that night, I crept into the hallway, careful not to disturb the loose floorboard that groaned under weight. The candle ring lay scattered wax puddles, hardened like pale flesh. I scooped up a shard of glass, heart pounding, and examined its fractured edge. Cold smooth, it held no reflection of me, only darkness. Whispers drifted down from the attic, faint and pleading. I gripped the stair rail, every muscle tensed. The mirror had moved again. I could almost feel its gaze. I shook my head, knowing where to go. Our grandmother's locked trunk, buried under moth-eaten quilts, held the journals she never let anyone read. I retrieved the rusted key from my pocket, the one Grandma pressed into my palm before she died, and climbed the stairs. The attic air was stifling, filled with the scent of old paper and damp wood. The bulb above flickered, throwing the carved vines into motion as though they reached for me. I knelt before the trunk and fitted the key into the lock. It clicked with a sob that echoed in my bones. Inside lay 3 leather-bound journals, their covers cracked and spattered with age. I opened the first to the first entry, dated July 1902, in spidery handwriting. I acquired the mirror today. It calls to me. In its depth, I see what I desire most. I fear its hunger, but cannot resist its gaze. I chill, slithered down my spine. I read on as the entries grew frantic. August 1902. I caught my brother staring too long. Now, he walks with eyes half-lidded, distant. His reflection smiles when he does not. September 1902. The mirror demands a sacrifice. It tastes fear. It will not rest until it claims a soul. I closed the journal hands, trembling. The humming came again, low and urgent, like a heartbeat. I snapped the journal shut and leaned against the trunk, mind racing. My sister. She was slipping into those pages that fate. The mirror had chosen her. I grabbed the second volume. This one detailed rituals, incantations, and the dead language Grandma warned us never to speak. One passage described binding the mirror's hunger, a silver cord of moonlit silver, tied by blood unbroken, can seal the glass's mouth. But the bond fractures if the mirror's will grows stronger than the binding. Blood unbroken? I pressed my palm against my chest. Eliza and I shared that cord, the same mother, the same womb. But would her blood, my blood, be enough? The third journal lay beneath its pages, brittle. I flipped hastily, skimming until I found diagrams, illustrations of the mirror surrounded by symbols, vines, twisting like serpents. A final note scrawled in frantic strokes. Beware the mirror's covetous intent. It does not merely reflect, it consumes. It wants to replace. A lover's whisper echoed in the shadows, replace. The attic door banged as if pushed by a gale. I leapt up, tumbling the journals together. The mirror stood behind me, its surface alive with movement. A face formed in the glass, pale and hollow-eyed. It raised an arm and tapped at the backside of its skull, twice mocking a knock. It whispered words that curled around my mind, promising power, promising reunion. Don't listen, I told myself. But my legs refused to move. The mirror's voice seeped into my skull. Your sister offers herself willingly. She dances in my depths. I ripped my gaze away and stumbled down the stairs, journals clutched to my chest. My head throbbed. When I reached the floor, the whisper was gone, replaced by the hum of the old heater. I slipped the journals beneath my bed and grabbed my phone. I dialed Eliza's number. No answer. I scanned the hallway. Her door stood closed. I pushed it open. The room was empty. No candles, no mirror. Panic flared. I sank to the floor, cradling my phone. It buzzed. A text from Eliza. Check the mirror. I'm all right. I dropped the phone. My pulse crashed. I raced to the attic. The bulb was shattered. I fumbled for the light switch, but the attic remained in half light. The mirror sat at the center, propped by a trunk. Its frame glowed unnaturally, the vines writhing. I approached slowly. Eliza, I called, voice tight. The glass rippled, and her reflection emerged. She smiled a cruel, distant curve. Her eyes were voids. She mouthed words I could not hear. Behind her, form mist gathered forming shapes. I recognized them, my journals burning in slow, silent flames. I lunged forward. No, but I passed through glass as though through water. I tumbled into the mirror, and the surface snapped shut behind me. Darkness wrapped me in cold wetness like drowning in oil. I felt skin slide and eyes brush my shoulder. A voice spoke in my ear, "Welcome to the other side." I clawed upward. Light glinted on metal. I was lying on the attic floor mirror in front of me. My heart pounded as I scrambled back. No wounds. My clothes were dry. Had it been a hallucination? I exhaled shakily. Then I heard Eliza's gasp behind me. I spun. She stood in the attic doorway, pale as wax. Her eyes were shimmering mirrors. "I tried to save you," I whispered, stepping forward. She tilted her head. "Why save me? I belong here now." Her voice was hers, familiar but hollow. I froze. The mirror's reflection shifted another. Eliza stood beside the first identical, down to trembling hair. They touched shoulders and smiled in unison. "Don't," I pleaded. They laughed soft and cruel. The mirror quaked. The symbols on its frame crawled inward as though devouring the wood. The attic's single bulb exploded, plunging us into absolute dark. I dropped to my knees, chest heaving. Face. Whispers spiraled around me. Hundreds of voices, not just mine or Eliza's. Children's laughter, a woman sobbing, a man moaning. They came from the glass, pleading to be freed, begging to be heard. I pressed my forehead to the attic floor. The journals, they held the key. I fumbled for the first beneath my pillow. No, that was the third. I reached blindly for the second. My fingers closed around leather. I yanked it free and opened to the binding ritual. Chant beneath the moon's full gaze, I read. Invoke the cord of blood, bind the mirror's covetous will. The moon. I looked up through the attic's small window. A slender crescent hung in the sky. Just enough. I found a silver chain hanging from a nail. It wasn't much Grandma's necklace, I realized, the one she always wore. I looped it around the mirror's base heart, hammering as if to tear free. My hand trembled as I recited the words. By blood of siblings, bound by fate, I seal your hunger, close your gate. No more reflection, no more claim. Depart, this world, return to flame. My voice echoed each word, a battle against the mirror's roar. The air grew cold. The glass clouded, then cracked at the center. A sound like a scream ripped through the attic. I fell back, shielding my face. The mirror's frame shook, vines nodded and writhed. Silence. The humming stopped. Light filtered through the cracked bulb. I dared to look. The mirror lay shattered shards of glass, scattering like frozen tears. The silver chain lay at its base intact. No reflection stared back, only empty space. Eliza stood beside me, blinking as though from a dream. I exhaled relief and dread mingling. The attic felt hollow, the air lighter, but I could still hear whispers, distant pleading. I gathered the journals and tucked them into my jacket. We descended the stairs together, my arm around her shoulders. As we reached the landing, I glanced back once more. Through the shards, I thought I saw a pale face, eyes wide peering at me. Then it vanished. The mirror's hunger was broken, but its echoes remained. And I knew its covetous spirit still lingered just beyond the glass. I awoke to a silence so profound it pressed against my eardrums. Dawn light crept through the curtains, but it felt hollow, every beam filtered as if unwilling to illuminate the world. Eliza lay beside me, her breath slow and even. I stared at her reflection in the bedroom mirror across the room, half expecting to see that pale girl from the glass, but none appeared. Just my tired eyes, and Eliza's familiar face. At breakfast, she toyed with toast eyes distant. I pushed eggs toward her. "How do you feel?" I asked. She looked up, brushed crumbs from her lip. "Better," she said. Her voice held a brittle edge, like fine china cracked. I nodded, sipping coffee, my gaze flickering to the silver chain I wore around my neck, the binding cord. It lay beneath my shirt, cool against my skin. I flexed my fingers, imagining the journals locked away in the attic trunk, sealed by dust and fear. But I knew it wasn't over. The moment we stepped outside, Eliza froze. A reflection glittered in the glass of the front door. My reflection, stepping forward, but no body behind it. The image lingered as I watched eyes unnervingly bright. I grabbed Eliza's hand and pulled her into the car. She let me silent her fingers slack. We drove to the lakeshore, hoping daylight and distance would cleanse the residue of terror. The water lay still undisturbed. We sat on a bench, the old wood groaning with every movement. Eliza leaned into me. "I dreamt of her last night," she said, voice low. "That girl." She called my name. I swallowed. "Did you answer?" She shook her head. I tried not to, but she reached out through the glass. I woke with scratches on my arm. I looked. 2 thin lines, faint but red. The binding cord had saved her from the mirror's depths, but scars remained. Real scars. "There's something else," she continued, voice trembling. I see her when I close my eyes, standing at the foot of my bed. My chest tightened. "We need to finish it, destroy the shards." Eliza nodded, a steely glint in her eyes. We returned home, stepping carefully over broken glass, scattered like frost on the hallway floor. The attic door loomed. I inhaled and we climbed. The journals lay where I'd hidden them, haphazard beneath a pile of quilts. I gathered them, flipping to the final entry in the 3rd volume. The shards must be fed to flame beneath moonless skies. Only then can the mirror's spirit be purged. Moonless skies. Tonight was a new moon. Eliza and I exchanged glances. The plan had been written over a century ago, but we had to follow it. I fetched an old metal pan and matches. Eliza carried a lantern, its flame flickering like a frightened heartbeat. Outside, the air was colder than I expected, nipping at my cheeks. We set up in the backyard, an old stone patio, cracked and overgrown. The journals rested on the wrought iron table open to the instruction page. I poured the glass shards into the pan. They rattled like 1,000 tiny screams. Eliza knelt beside me. "Are you sure this will work?" she asked, voice small. I met her eyes. "It has to." My hand trembled as I struck a match. The flame caught the pan's edge. I coaxed the fire beneath the shards. They glowed red at first, then white hot. I recited the words from the journal, voice rising in fervor. "Spirit of reflection, vine and frame. Break your hunger, sever your claim. Shards to flame, no echo remain. Depart this realm, vanish in pain." The shards hissed, sending sparks into the night air. The flame roared, and the metal pan grew too hot to touch. I shifted back, shielding my face. Screams, or was it the wind, whipped around us? The lantern guttered, but the fire burned bright. Suddenly, a shape emerged at the edge of the firelight. A small girl's silhouette, eyes shining like embers. Eliza gasped. I dropped to my knees, heart thundering. "Stay back," I shouted, voice hoarse. but the shape moved closer, silent and relentless. "Eliza," I whispered, rising. "Get to safety." She lingered, torn. The girl tilted her head, mouth curving in that thin, cruel smile. The reflection's final claim, it wanted Eliza's place. I realized then the ritual needed more than flames. It needed resolution. I had to choose. I dropped the journals and rushed forward, seizing the girl's hand. Her skin was cold as glass, unyielding. For a moment, I stared into those empty eyes and felt her loneliness, a hunger born of reflection, of being trapped between worlds. My own reflection shimmered on the pane of the nearby window. I lunged, smashing the window with my elbow. Glass splintered, and the reflection fractured into shards that drifted upward like ghosts freed. The girl reached for my sister, whispering words that twisted reality. "Join me. Be free of flesh." Eliza flinched back, tears in her eyes. I grabbed her arm. "Leave her," I snapped. "She's not you." I kicked the metal pan toward the ritual fire. It tumbled, shards clattering across the stones. The flames surged, engulfing the pan and the scattered glass. The girl screamed a sound that cracked the sky. She reached toward us, fingers elongating like shadows. I bent to scoop the journals into my coat and toss them into the flames. Paper caught fire, each page curling and blackening instantly. The wind snatched burning paper into the air. I watched as the words curled into embers until the journals were gone one by one. Then the fire surged higher, as if fed by the mirror's own covenant. The girl's scream crescendoed, echoing off nearby trees. I covered my ears, staring at the blaze. A flash of light, blinding and white, filled the yard. I fell backward, the world spinning. When I opened my eyes, the fire was reduced to glowing coals. The metal pan lay twisted and blackened. No sign of the girl. Eliza knelt beside me, trembling. "Is it over?" she whispered. I nodded, voice cracking. "It's over." We sat in ash and moonlight until dawn. Our skin ached, voices hoarse. We hugged, holding on to each other, as though the world might still shatter. The next morning, we swept the stones clean. No shards remained, only the faintest glint where the pan had rested. Never saw that girl again. Eliza's reflection returned to normal. No lag, no hollow eyes. But sometimes, in the quietest moments, I catch a glimpse of something in the mirror that shouldn't be there. A flicker of vine-like symbol, or the ghost of a smile at the edge of the glass. I think of Grandma's trunk waiting in the attic, filled with secrets. The mirror's hunger was broken, but its echo lingers, a promise that reflection never truly dies. And if I ever feel the mirror's chill again, I will remember the flare, final fire, the sister I saved. And the truth Grandma warned, some reflections hunger to remain. They will return. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I was kneeling beside my bed, fumbling for the torn hem of a sock under the crease of the mattress. Midnight was settling over the room like a suffocating blanket, and the weak glow of my phone screen cast long, clawing shadows across the floorboards. I paused, my breath catching as a faint whisper scratched at the edge of my hearing. A soft scrape, as though fingernails were grazing the wood of the closet door. My heart hammered, and I flattened my back against the bed frame, staring at that dark panel of painted pine. It had started days before, on nights when the power blinked and the hall light died. leaving me in complete darkness. I had huddled beneath my sheets, senses stretched taut, listening for the rhythm of my own pulse. The closet sat across the foot of my bed, its white sliding doors seeming innocuous in daylight. But at night, it felt like the maw of something waiting to swallow me. I convinced myself it was just nerves. My apartment building had been cheap. The closets, stuck in their tracks, warped by humidity, producing creaks whenever they moved. Simple, explainable, until the eyes appeared. I first saw them as two shifting pinpricks of pale luminescence just along the gap where the closet doors met. My breath hitched, and I dared not move. After a moment, they vanished, as if the darkness had swallowed them whole. My skin prickled, and I replayed the sight in my mind, trying to convince myself that it was a trick of my tired eyes, an after-image from my phone's flashlight, or reflections from the hallway beyond. I slipped into my pajamas that night with an uneasy flutter in my chest, pulling the covers up to my chin. Over the next few nights, the incidents grew more insistent. I would lie on my back, the ceiling fan's slow turn, lulling me into a trance until I caught the faintest motion in the corner of my vision. My eyes would flicker toward the closet, and though the doors remained closed, I felt compelled to count the moments, 1, 2, 3, until something shifted just behind the wood. A low, intermittent tap, like someone testing the surface with gloved fingertips. I'd sit bolt upright, heart pounding, and call out to the emptiness, my own voice echoing back, muffled by the walls. No reply. The dripping faucet in the bathroom sounded distant, the traffic on the street below, a muted hum, and yet the closet door pressed into my awareness like a living thing. By the fourth night, I had set a desk lamp beside my bed, its harsh bulb illuminating every inch of the room. I tried to read, but my eyes kept darting to the closet. I could almost believe it was just an old apartment, settling until I saw a figure step into view behind the frosted glass of my wardrobe mirror. It was indistinct, no more than a dark silhouette, but I knew it mirrored my every move. When I reached for my phone to photograph it, the figure lunged backward, and the mirror glass rippled like water, distorting the reflection before stabilizing. My arm froze midair. I nearly drowned in my own terror, imagining what could be trapped behind that door. Every closet horror story I had ever read rushed back rotting corpses, vengeful spirits, grotesque creatures. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the vision to vanish. When I dared open them again, the room was empty. The lamp still burning, as though mocking my fear. I lay trembling until exhaustion finally dragged me into a fitful sleep. The next day, I half expected to laugh it off. At work, I joked about the haunted closet, but my laughter died in my throat when I noticed my reflection in the break room's window. In the background, right behind my reflection, there was a pair of glowing dots suspended just above where my shoulders met. A trick of glare, surely. But when I turned, there was nothing there, just the dull fluorescent lights and a stack of neglected coffee cups. That night, I resolved to confront it. I opened the closet door by daylight and examined its interior mismatched hangers, a flimsy suit jacket, a stack of old textbooks in a cardboard box. Beneath the shoes, I swept away stray dust bunnies, telling myself I was overreacting. Everything was normal. I dusted my hand across the shelves, even flipped the hanging rod to check the back wall. I shut the doors firmly and walked away, feeling smugly proud of myself for banishing childish fears. But when night fell, the lamp I'd relied on flickered and plunged into darkness. I heard the scrape again, sharper, this time like claws raking wood. My skin crawled. I switched the lamp back on with shaking fingers, the beam landing squarely on the closet doors. Their two narrow slits of color, deeper than shadows, glowing where no light should reach. I stumbled back, knocking the lamp over. Its bulb shattered against the floor, with a furnace-bright snap, plunging me into black and feeding my panic. I groped for my phone and tapped the flashlight icon, sweeping its beam across the room. It landed on the closet, and the doors creaked open a fraction, as though pushed from the inside. I blinked, unable to tell if the movement was real or a consequence of my racing heart. The smell hit me at that moment, a damp, earthy scent, like moss soaked in rain, almost sweet in its suffocation. I had never stored anything organic in that closet. My breath caught in my throat. I retreated to the far corner of the room, shining the light back and forth, desperate for evidence. There was nothing but empty hangers and crumpled paperwork. No creature, no pair of eyes. Yet before I could blink, two dots of light appeared on the inside of the left door panel, inches apart, burning like stars against the wood. They stayed fixed, unblinking, even as I lunged forward to touch them. My hand met only cold paint. The dots vanished, sinking into the door, as if it was liquid glass. I slammed the closet shut and braced myself against the opposite wall, flashlight trained on the door. The scrape continued from within, accompanied by a soft whispering, a voice no louder than wind through reeds. It seemed to repeat a single phrase, but I could not parse the words. Terror rolled through me like a wave. I wrapped my arms around my legs and compressed myself until I felt ready to burst. Time stretched. The whispering slowed, the scraping stopped. There was only silence, heavy and oppressive. My throat was raw from screaming. I pressed my ear to the door, feeling my heartbeat thud in my skull. In the hush, I sensed another heartbeat, slower but steady, as if something large and abnormal paced inside the closet. I backed away, the flashlight forgotten. The lamp lay in fragments behind me, an inanimate casualty of my fear. I knew sleep would be impossible. When dawn came, I left the apartment without a backward glance, but the image of those glowing eyes and the faint taste of damp earth on my tongue lingered. I swore I would never return, and still, I can't shake the feeling that something watched me as I fled. Whatever life resides in those shadows, unaware that I saw, it waits patient. It remembers. The morning after I fled, I stayed at a friend's apartment, unwilling to face my own walls. But by evening, exhaustion and misplaced bravado drew me back, keys trembling in my hand. The hallway light was mercifully bright, its sterile hum chasing away shadows. I reached my door, paused, and drew a breath sharp enough to taste. Inside, everything lay exactly as I'd left it. The shattered lamp shards swept into a box, the bed rumpled, and the closet door closed. I flicked on the overhead light, every corner exposed. My pulse slowed until I heard it. A low murmur seeped from the closet seams, like distant voices arguing in hushed desperation. My heart lurched. I stood motionless, fingertips grazing the doorknob. The whispering rose and fell urgent, yet contained, as though something or someone was trapped inside, fighting to be heard, but fearful of detection. The hairs on my neck stiffened. I swallowed a dry gulp. It felt wrong, but the unrelenting draw of that terrified chorus compelled me forward. I had to know if I was chasing ghosts or stumbling into a nightmare far darker than I imagined. I retrieved a small tape recorder from my nightstand drawer, an impulse born of scientific stubbornness, and clicked it on. The tiny red light winked at me. Then, with trembling fingers, I opened the door halfway and shone my phone light past the threshold. The beam illuminated a narrow corridor of hanging coats, a tattered trench coat. I'd never worn a wool blazer with an inexplicable damp patch, and a moth-eaten sweater whose threads seemed to twitch in the glow. No creature lurked among them, only the fleece collars and plastic hangers swaying gently as if stirred by breath. The whispering came again, a stuttered rhythm that cut through the electric hum of my phone's screen. I raised the recorder. "Hello," I croaked. "Who's there?" Silence. Then almost imperceptibly came a rasp. "Help me." It sighed, brittle and desperate. I flinched, nearly dropping the phone. My spine coiled with dread. The voice repeated softer this time, as though ashamed. "Please." The tone was sorrowful, not malevolent, an ache of loneliness that pierced something deep inside me. I crept into the closet. My shoulders brushed against the damp coat. A chill bloomed across my skin. I pressed the light deeper, barely enough to see the back wall lined with cheap wallpaper, peeling in long strips. Near the floor, a small hatch door I'd never noticed before sat ajar, its latch dangling like a broken jaw. My breath hitched. Could this crevice lead somewhere beyond my narrow closet? Something inside stirred, answering my silent question with a soft shuffle. My foot nudged the hatch downward. A swirl of stagnant air escaped, carrying the faintest hint of decay. I forced myself to lean over, shining the light through the opening. Below was darkness, as total as a black hole swallowing my beam whole. And from that void, a faint murmur drifted upward, voices overlapping in fractured pleas. Some whispered only one word. "Trapped." Others repeated, "Not alone." I snapped the hatch shut, my hand trembling so violently the latch rattled against the frame. I backed out of the closet, heart pounding, and pressed my back against the door, phone light trained on my feet. The coats overhead rustled, though no breeze stirred. Then came a distinct dragging sound, something heavy, rhythmic. My gaze shot up to find the trench coat sliding slowly along the rod, as if pulled by an unseen hand. It moved toward the center of the closet, stretching its shoulders wide. I swallowed. A faint silhouette flickered beneath the coat's hem, a shape too tall to be human, too fluid to be fabric. My pulse pounded in my ears. I stumbled backward, nearly lunging clear of the closet. The whispering rose in incandescent fury, a crescendo of broken voices layering atop one another, until I could scarcely discern any individual plea. I clamped a hand over my ears, but the noise drilled through my skull, a cacophony of anguish and isolation. Then abruptly, it cut out, leaving a vacuum of silence so oppressive I could hear my own breathing, ragged and terrified. Desperate to reclaim control, I locked the closet door with my foot and bolted across the room. I grabbed a kitchen chair and wedged it under the knob, pinning the door shut. My recorder lay forgotten on the floor, its red light pulsing. I approached it, chest heaving, and pressed stop. The screen read 000217. 2 minutes 17 seconds of pleading whispers. I shivered as I replayed the audio. Multiple voices layered in breathless terror, their words overlapping into an inhuman chorus. One voice, distinct and quivering, cried, "I've been here so long." My stomach churned. Who were they? How long had they waited behind this door? And why choose me to hear their suffering? The rational part of my mind screamed for therapy or an exorcist. The panicked part wondered if I should search local news for missing person cases. Instead, I climbed onto my bed and pressed my back against the headboard, eyes fixed on the sealed closet. Every second stretched into eternity. My phone slid from my fingers and clattered to the floor, but I dared not pick it up. I felt exposed like a live wire sparking in an empty room. Hours passed. The lamp in the hallway switched itself off, and a distant thunderstorm rumbled outside, rain pattering against the window pane. Lightning flashed, illuminating the closet's silhouette through my bedroom window, as though a silent spectator. In that brief brilliance, I thought I saw the faint outline of a face, hollowed cheeks, and empty eyes gazing back. Before I could focus, the next flash stormed across the sky, and the image vanished. My nerves unraveled. I hugged my knees and whispered to empty air, "Who are you? What do you want?" No answer came. The room fell into a tense hush, punctuated only by the distant patter of rain. Then, almost playfully, came a soft rap against the bedroom door. Tap, 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 like a visitor announcing themselves. My head shot toward the door. The rapping paused for a heartbeat, then resumed, growing more deliberate, more insistent. Panic flared. I glanced at the closet. If the voices inside were desperate, whoever or whatever on the other side of my door seemed confident. I could not tell which terrified me more. I slid off the bed and crept toward the door. Every step a strained negotiation with my terror. My hand hovered at the knob. Should I open it? Or should I retreat? The rapping stopped. Silence. Then a whisper so close it sounded like it came from right behind me. "They're listening." My breath caught. I whirled. Nothing. Just the looming closet and the silent hallway beyond my doorstep. I pressed my palm against the locked bedroom door chest, heaving. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I lay inches from the wall, mind-racing heartbeat echoing. As dawn bled into the sky, the rain ceased, and the sound of birdsong mocked my terror. I realized then that the closet was not merely a hiding place. It was a channel, a conduit for unspoken voices, and I was its unwilling audience. I needed answers, yet fear held me prisoner. Tomorrow, I vowed I'd do something different. But downstairs, the hallway light still flickered, and somewhere behind closed doors, eyes watched and voices whispered. Their pleas had become my obsession, an echo in my mind that refused to fade. My resolve hardened with the first streaks of dawn, but the closet's silent vigil and its chorus of ghosts lingered like a pulse in my skull. I refused to hide any longer. The night before had left me frayed, but also strangely awakened, as if I'd tasted the edge of something vast and unknowable. I poured coffee into a chipped mug and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the closet door as though it were an old friend and a sworn enemy in the same breath. The wet morning light slanted through my curtains, illuminating motes of dust that drifted like ghosts in the air. I steeled myself and approached the door. I removed the chair I'd wedged against the knob, my hands unsteady with adrenaline and dread. I flicked on my phone light and paused, pressing my palm flat against the cool wood. The surface was still unremarkable, except for two faint, concentric discolorations where the eyes had glowed. A memory of damp earth, the touch of cold paint. For a moment, I hesitated, then gripped the knob and twisted. The door opened with a thud so loud it resonated in my chest. Inside the closet was empty. The hatch remained shut, coats hung silent, and the whispering was gone. I took a slow step forward, shining the light across every inch of the space. My breath came in shallow bursts. I could feel the absence of voices as keenly as their presence. I reached in and ran my fingers along the rod, tugging gently on each hanger. My phone's beam caught a glint on the floor, a tiny metal fragment half buried in dust. I crouched and picked it up, a rusted key ornate and curved like a serpent's fang. My pulse thundered. I'd never owned it. Where had it come from? A sudden clatter behind me made me jump. The door slammed shut, not by wind or design, but by force. I whirled and flicked my light upward. There, embossed on the inner door panel, where the key had rested against the wood, was an impression of a keyhole that shouldn't exist. The surface rippled around it, as though the wood had been molten at some point. My breath caught heart hammering. The key fit the impression, exactly sliding in with a satisfying click. I turned the key. The closet around me shivered. The hangers rattled, dust drifted down like ashes, and the entire structure groaned. I felt the air shift, like inhaling the breath of something enormous. Beneath my feet, a low rumble echoed. The hatch sprang open, swinging inward on unseen hinges. I shone my light into the gap. Beyond was a narrow stairwell of twisted iron steps, coated in slick moss, descending into darkness that seemed to absorb the light. Fear pressed against me, sharp and immediate. My instincts screamed to bolt, to flee this sacrilege, but something deeper pity, fascination, guilt urged me onward. I slipped the key into my pocket, swallowed my pulse, and took the first step. Each footfall echoed metallic and hollow, down and down into the abyss. The air grew damp, heavy with the scent of earth and rot, and the whispering began anew. Soft at first, fractured words that scuttled against my eardrums. Lost. Alone. Us. I reached a landing where the stairs ended in a rusted trapdoor half open. I lowered myself through the opening into a cavern vast beyond measure. My phone's light touched damp stone walls, slick with condensation. The floor was littered with skeletal fragments of wood and metal, but also with personal items. A child's toy soldier, a cracked photograph of a smiling family, a single woman's shoe. I felt bile rise in my throat. These were things people had lost or left behind years ago. The whispering swelled as I stepped forward. Faces emerged from the gloom, pale spectral figures whose features wavered like heat haze. Their eyes were hollow wells of sorrow. I whispered, "I'm here." Their voices merged into a single lament. "You broke the door." My forehead creased. I didn't know. The echo of my own words felt distant, like spoken underwater. One figure drifted closer, a child translucent and shaking. "Help us," it breathed. The voice was thin, pathetic, a wounded thing, trapped by the watcher. I asked Watcher. The child's head turned toward darkness at the room center. The hush that followed draped over me like a wet blanket. I trained my light where the figures trembled, and there, standing at the edge of the beam, was a tall, slender silhouette. It leaned forward, slightly elongated limbs pressed close to its body, and its head cocked to one side as if curious. Its eyes, voids of utter black, studied me. For a heartbeat, I felt no fear, only a hollow reverence. Here stood the Watcher, the entity whose gaze had plagued my nights. The creature's form was not monstrous in the traditional sense. It was almost elegant, impossibly thin, as if carved from shadow. Yet it exuded malice or perhaps judgment in the tilt of its head. The whispering ceased completely, as though every trapped soul had fallen silent to witness this moment. I swallowed. "Release them," I said, voice trembling but firm. The Watcher's head dipped ever so slightly. My knees threatened to buckle. I don't know how." It took a step forward, and the air grew colder still. The figures behind me recoiled, pressing into the walls. A whisper, not from any of the trapped souls, but from the Watcher, filled my mind like a wordless press, remember. A wave of images coursed through me, flashbacks to childhood secrets, moments when I'd locked doors to hide shame and pain. Every time I turned away from others' suffering, I gasped, staggering backward. The Watcher's form shimmered, and I understood it fed on my refusal to look, to help, to see. It was the product of every closet of shame, every secret buried and ignored. Tears stung my eyes. I sank to my knees and lifted my hands. "I see you," I whispered to the Watcher, then turned and faced the trapped souls. "I see you all." The room stilled. The Watcher's silhouette stretched, then dissolved in a swirl of darkness that spiraled upward and toward the hatch. A gust of wind knocked me forward, and the trapdoor slammed shut above me, burying the stairs. The key turned in my pocket, warming against my skin. Silence. Then, as though a seal had broken, a rush of voices, gentle, grateful, whispered, "Thank you, free, light." The spectral figures faded one by one, their features softening into pale motes of light that drifted upward and through cracks in the cavern ceiling. I pressed my palm against the cold stone, overwhelmed by relief and sorrow. When the last glow vanished, I felt utterly alone. I found the hatch and pushed it open, crawling back up the steps, up through the closet, and out into my bedroom. The closet door stood closed, its surface smooth. The keyhole vanished. I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. I exhaled until my lungs burned. I tossed the key into my nightstand drawer and locked it away forever. Days later, I still wake in the dark, convinced I see movement beyond the closet doors. But when I stare long enough, I feel only absence. No eyes, no whispering. The closet offers nothing but normality now. Yet sometimes at night, I swear I hear a soft sigh, a fleeting thanks that drifts through the walls, reminding me that eyes once watched, and now they rest in peace.